Taoiseach, there's no doubt that the budget yesterday announced in this House places a disproportionate burden on older people in our community and in our society, and targets them in a savage way. And it seems as if the cuts themselves were designed to target an older person when he or she was most vulnerable, when he or she was sick, bereaved, or living alone. And I want to quote, Taoiseach, a statement you made in 2008 in this House in relation to how a government should behave with older people. And I quote, "A government should not use the elderly as a tool or weapon reducing them to economic statistics. Elderly people do not want to be pressurised about means tests and application forms about their property, their savings, what they have in the bank, whether a man from government will call to their home, or if they will lose their right to the medical card. They do not want that. They're anxious about what happens to themselves and their families." And that's a direct quote from what you said, Taoiseach. And yesterday's budget perhaps sums up everything you said the older people didn't want from a government. From the abolition of the telephone allowance, Taoiseach, which is unacceptable in terms of what it will do to older people. The withdrawal, definite withdrawal, of 35,000 medical cards from people over 70. And then that wider witch hunt of another 100,000 cards that will be taken from people. And Taoiseach, it started already. The letters are being issued, so savings can take effect from January. Anyone listening to Joe Duffy Liveline during the week would have had those letters read out that are going out withdrawing cards from people. The five-fold increase in prescription charges over the last 2 years is going to hit older people significantly.
Thank you.
The doubling of property tax will hit older people. The reducing of tax relief on health insurance and the abolition of the bereavement grant, all targeted against older people. You add it all up, Taoiseach, and it represents a very savage attack and targeting of older people in our community. And the question I have for you, Taoiseach, why? Why in this particular budget did you single out older people for particular targeting and discriminatory treatment? What did the older people of Ireland ever do to you to deserve this kind of treatment?
Thank you.
I would ask you, Taoiseach, will you commit to reversing these cuts, particularly the abolition of the telephone allowance and the definite withdrawal of 35,000 medical cards from over 70s?
Taoiseach.
First of all, as I said to Deputy Martin, that the budget for 2014 is the first and critical step, Concola, that will allow this country to get out of the bailout programme into which we were led by Fianna Fáil. And secondly, it's designed to get this country back to work, which is the central mandate given to this government of the Fine Gael party and the Labour Party. And the budget yesterday contains a whole series of measures to deal with that. Now, Deputy Martin mentioned a number of issues here that affect older people. I might say, though, that the Budget 2014 has extended the principle of previous budgets of protecting and supporting the elderly in a great number of ways. For example, Deputy Healy-Rae, the state pension, the carer schemes, the free travel, free television licences have not been touched. And because we recognise that fuel is a big issue for the elderly, the fuel allowance has not been changed. And excise duty on fuel has been left untouched as well. And the tax treatment for the elderly remains unchanged, and there is no change in the net income for pensioners as a result of this budget. Those aged 65 and over will continue to be treated more favourably under the Irish Income Tax Code than all other taxpayers. This favourable treatment of pensioners has been protected by the budget. Now, the question of the bereavement grant was raised. This was dealt with very adequately by the Minister for Social Protection yesterday. The allowances that are there to support our elderly still continue and are untouched, despite the decision in respect of the bereavement grant. I might say that the average cost of a funeral between 3,000 and 5,000 around the country, up to 10,000 in Dublin. In respect of medical cards, the position here, Deputy Martin, which you're well aware of, is that when a card is issued to an applicant, the card is issued for 3 or 4 years and there's an onus and a duty upon the person who receives the card. If there's any change in their circumstances, they are supposed to notify the HSE in this case. It rarely applies. In an analysis of 1.2 million cards last year, I think it was 22 that were returned voluntarily. What I want to say today, Deputy Martin, is that there has been no change in the eligibility criteria for medical cards. So just a second now.
Sorry.
No change in the eligibility criteria.
Deputy would have a chance to respond.
So a pensioner who receives the old age pension, contributory or non-contributory, or has the changed limits here, is fully qualified to a medical card and will get it in accordance with those criteria.
Thank you.
But I think it's important to say this, Deputy Martin, that of the 1.8 million cards that have been issued, more than ever before, the people are paying for these cards. Now, some people have died. Some cards are redundant in the sense that people's incomes have changed and they've moved up. Some were migrant workers and have gone back to their own countries. Others, for one reason or another, are not in the eligibility category. So if people, there's a need here, genuinely, for the HSE to be able to communicate to pensioners, in particular, that when they get a review notice, there's no point in not dealing with it. Because anybody who's under these criteria, of course, they get their medical card. But I think it's important to note that doctors who are in receipt of payment for the GMS medical card lists, in some cases, in significant numbers of these cases, they may not be eligible cards anymore for the reasons that I've mentioned. So I think it's important to check those lists accurately and see how many cards that have been issued are still viable. And as I said, there's been no change in the criteria or the eligibility. So there hasn't.
Thank you.
So everybody who's entitled to a medical card on those criteria gets a medical card. And I don't think that we should be sending out scare messages to pensioners that all these medical cards have been taken away. 1.8 million medical cards issued, and even when the new eligibility limits and the threshold limits for GP cards are issued, 97% of people over 70 years of age will have access either to medical cards or free GP cards.
Thank you. Deputy Mark.
The older people who might be watching this morning will find your response incredible, because you've managed to achieve basically saying that black is white. I mean, you just said, Taoiseach, that there was no change in the eligibility threshold. That's what you said. I just want to quote back what's in, just for the record, in relation to Minister Burton's social welfare announcements. Reduce income thresholds for the over 70 medical cards, €900 couple and €500 single. That is a reduction in eligibility, which will take 35,000, which will withdraw medical cards from 35,000 older people. So don't please come in and say, well, you accept it. You didn't say that. You said the opposite to that a moment ago. And that's why older people watching here are saying, what's going on in this place? Someone can actually stand up and say, no, don't bother with the fine print of the budget. What that says isn't really happening at all. That's the hallmark of yesterday's presentation. And Taoiseach, thanks be to God you didn't touch the free fuel, because you did it last year. You reduced it from 32 weeks to 26 weeks. So you already cut that last year. And again, when you said earlier that the income of older people will not be hit. That's denying reality, Taoiseach. The property tax will be doubled. That's going to hit people's income. They're going to have to pay for it. The medical cards will hit people's income. The prescription charge, Taoiseach, it's gone from 50 cents to 2.50.
Sorry, Deputy, this is a question.
People are going to have to pay for that, Taoiseach. That reduces their income. You see, you have this broad kind of, the big lie, there's no cuts in the headline rates. But if you add everything else up, there's a significant reduction in the take-home income of older people. You're taking money from older people via the back door, Taoiseach. And I think you should acknowledge that. Because when people watch in and have the kind of denials of reality articulated on an ongoing basis, they lose all faith in this House.
Thank you, Deputy.
In terms of any credibility emanating from it, Taoiseach. And the same happened last week, Taoiseach, in terms of discretionary medical cards. I mean, you denied the reality last week that discretionary medical cards would be taken from people.
We're over time.
And it took a whole host of letters from deputies, and then your own people at the weekend said, by the way, Taoiseach, there is a problem with the discretionary medical cards, despite you denying that reality here last week.
Thank you.
So people had been hit, Taoiseach. And what I ask you, Taoiseach, are you considered will you consider reversing the abolition of the household benefits, which is again a direct take from the income of older people, and will you reverse the decision to lower the thresholds in relation to the over 70?
Of course, Deputy Martin, I acknowledge the fact that the budgetary resolutions went through yesterday and the changes that are here at the very highest level will apply, of course. But let me repeat again for you that the state pension, the carer schemes, the free travel, the free TV licence have not been touched, the fuel allowance has not been changed. There's no change in the net income for pensioners as a result of this budget. Unlike what you did yourself, when you cut the widow's pension, the blind pension, the invalidity pension by over €8 per week in budget 2010 for under 65s, Deputy Martin. You also cut the disability allowance across the board by €8 per week without regard to means testing. You also cut the core social welfare rates by €16 a week, or 8% in budgets 2010 and 2011, without any discussion with them. And Fine Gael and Labour, at least its government, has maintained core social welfare rates since. And I might point out to you that in your own 4-year plan, which you won't listen to now, you intended to cut €1.5 billion from social welfare services. So don't come in here the morning after the budget with your opportunistic blather that you go on with all the time. The situation here, that in respect of the medical card list, it's very important that we find out the true situation here. How many cards are redundant? How many migrant workers have gone away? How many people have died in respect of medical cards?
Sorry, you
never listen, do you? The point is the taxpayer are paying doctors for medical cards in respect of the GMS list. That's quite normal and that's the way it should be. But those lists should be accurate. And the reason for carrying out an analysis of this is to find out what is the truth.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
How many have died whose cards are still on the list? How many migrant workers have gone away? How many are redundant? How many have changed and whether circumstances have increased? So the message here, Deputy Martin, is that for medical card applicants, the vast majority of these who, in the ordinary way, the eligibility limits apply and they qualify for their full medical cards. And those who lose them at the top end qualify for GP cards.
Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald. Hey, Deputy, will you settle down? Settle down. I called Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald. Thank you. I don't see you as Mary Lou MacDonald. Deputy MacDonald, without interruption, please. Thank you.
Of course, it's not just older citizens that have been targeted in yesterday's budget. Yesterday, young people took a very significant hit and got a very clear message from this government. Since 2011, Taoiseach, when you took office, there are 18,000 less young people working in our economy. Approximately 1,700 people emigrate from this state every week. Shocking statistic. And the vast majority of them are young, they're educated, and they leave because they've no prospect of decent work here. I think that those young people, the under-25s, their mothers, their fathers, their grandparents, people throughout the state watched yesterday hoping against hope that your government would provide something for them, for their children, for their grandchildren, that would mean that they would not be forced to join the lengthening emigration trail at our airports. But what did you do? You announced a range of brutal measures aimed specifically at the youth of this state, none more startling than the slashing of the job seekers allowance for under 25s. And you've now very clearly decided that the youth of Ireland will carry the can for the mistakes of this government and of the last. Having failed to create the environment in which our young people can flourish, you now want rid of them. And emigration is now the official policy, employment policy for young people coming from this government. A cut of up to a third to job seekers for people under 25s sends an unmistakable message to young people that this government regards them not as the future of this country, but rather as a burden. I question, Taoiseach, the legality of such a brazenly discriminatory measure. I presume that you've had legal advice as to its legality. You might clarify that. But above all, Taoiseach, can you just come clean this morning?
Thank you.
And say what is very obvious to all of us, to young people, to their families and to their communities, that just like Fianna Fáil before you, a policy of forced emigration is your policy of choice for our young people.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Well, I don't accept your assertion at all, Deputy MacDonald. I heard you this morning being questioned on this yourself, and when you were asked what you would do, you gave no answer, other than Sinn Féin policy of Sinn Féin promotion. Now, I regard the young people of this country as being, as same as everybody else does, our future. But you seem to want to confine them to the dole queues. You don't actually want to give them the opportunity to get off those live registered dole queues, to have the opportunity to get training, to have the opportunity to get mentoring, to have the opportunity to go and do further education, to have the opportunity to go and be able to find a job and an opportunity where there's an incentive for them to actually do that. An incentive, Deputy MacDonald. I don't accept your assertion at all in this. Clearly, there has to be, in reforming the social protection system, there has to be a difference between those who have the motivation and the incentive to go to work and get a job and better themselves. There are now so many opportunities being provided by this government and by a range of ministries to help young people to actually improve themselves. So the allocation in Northern Ireland, I understand, is about €65 for an under 25, which is 144 down here. And if a young person, Deputy MacDonald, now goes on a training course, or now goes into a back-to education allowance scheme, or is a graduate and gets on the job bridge scheme, the allocation goes to 160 or over 200, depending on the subsidy that's involved here. So clearly there are opportunities and incentives for young people, young men and young women, to get out there and avail of these opportunities. And it's the challenge of government and its agencies to provide that, for instance. For example, young people under 26 who participate now in a back-to-education course will have their job seekers allowance increased to 160 per week. That means that in addition to the sort of the enhanced career and job prospects from improving skills and education levels, there's a huge financial incentive for those young people whom you know and whom I know to participate in education and in employment or training. Budget 2014 has also allocated an additional €14 million to increase the number of places for young people. For example, specifically, 1,500 new places on the Jobs Plus scheme, and amending the criteria for under 25s to only 6 months being unemployed to become eligible, and 1,500 job bridge places for those under 25. And there are a minimum of 2,000 places ring-fenced for the under 25s who are out of work in 2014 at a cost of €6 million. And these places will be provided under a follow-up to the Momentum programme, which has been very successful in 2013. So next year, the Department of Social Protection with Minister Burton will spend €1.08 billion, 1.08 billion on work, on training, on education places, and on related supports for young people and for job seekers.
Thank you.
And that's an increase of €85 million, Deputy MacDonald, on the projected spend this year. So what we want to see here is a real drive to incentivise and motivate young people to take a back-to-education course, take a training, take a mentoring, take one of the schemes for which places have been reserved for young people, and allow them the opportunity to, as it were, fulfil their potential and lead on to the world of work where their work is rewarded, instead of languishing in a dispirited, disappointed fashion on the dole queues. That's not what this government is about. This budget is about bailout exit in December and about providing jobs and opportunities for young people to work, which the vast majority of them want to do.
Thank you. Deputy MacDonald, 1 minute. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you clarified the fact that you recognise that young people want to work. Because the rhetoric from your government has consistently been to say, either openly or to insinuate, that young people choose social welfare as a lifestyle choice, that there's some kind of a layabout generation. They're nothing of the sort. Yes, they want to work. Where are the jobs for them? Where are the jobs? Where are the jobs for our young people? The disgrace in all of this is that you as a government would have the brazen hard neck to lay at the feet of our young people your failure to provide opportunities. And you see half-baked Mickey Mouse schemes that you come up with to massage the live register figures. They won't cut it, Taoiseach. People want real jobs and decent work. The only thing that your budget achieved yesterday is to take 32 million out of the pockets of people under 25 on job seekers who want to work, who can't find work. But you didn't stop at that. You've cut funding to third-level education. You've whacked up the registration fee for third-level students again. You've taken money from young people on FOS courses. You've hit apprentices now and insist that they pay a registration fee. So please spare me your waffle and your baloney about your concern for our young people. I tell you what you have incentivised. You have made it clear to people now, to our young people, that it's time to pack their bags, it's time to leave, because this government has failed them, will fail them, sees them as a burden. And if I'm wrong, Taoiseach, if by chance I'm wrong, then can I put it to you, prove me wrong and reverse the cut specifically to job seekers' allowances. Prove that I'm wrong and make that decision and announce it here in the Dáil this morning.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Well, it's a good flow of rhetoric, so I'll prove you wrong. For the 3 years prior to this government being elected, we lost 250,000 jobs. That's 250,000 jobs in 3 years, or 7,000 a month. Now, the economic mess that was left behind by Fianna Fáil over many years has had to be cleared up, and we've stabilised that, and we're now creating 3,000 jobs a month. That's progress. It's not where we want to be. That's the first thing. The second thing, Deputy MacDonald, and you look at the figures yourself, the live register has declined now for 15 consecutive months, and the unemployment rate is down from 15.5 to 13.5. And we are creating jobs for young people. And if you say that the Job Bridge scheme for young graduates is a Mickey Mouse operation, then you should go and speak to people from every constituency, young graduates confined to the dole queues, but because we reform the system, they get an opportunity to go into the world of work. And I might say to you that over 65% of those who go on a job bridge scheme find full employment as a consequence. And if you think that's a Mickey Mouse operation, then go and speak to those young people. How dare you insult their intelligence?
Thank you.
How dare you insult their motivation? How dare you insult their right to go and have a job? How dare you, with your Sinn Féin antics of wanting to confine our young people to dole queues in perpetuity, give them taxpayers' money, give them tax and confine them to the dole queues. What we've done here in the last 12 months has been to create 34,000 new jobs. Many of those are young people, young men and young women, and we want to increase that. Minister Bruton set out his target for next year of 50,000 new jobs. Many of those will be young people. We're very proud of them, but how dare you get up in the House of Parliament and insult our young people to say that they're involved in Mickey Mouse schemes when clearly they lead on to opportunity and employment, which is what you should be putting forward. Not one constructive suggestion from you. Not one.
Deputy Donnelly, please. Thank you. Hey, Deputy. Deputy Doherty, would you please so respect Deputy Doherty? Deputy Doherty. Deputy Doherty, you leave the house if you're not careful. I call Deputy Donnelly. Now, would you stay quiet, please? please stay quiet? Deputy Bannon, will you stay quiet, please? I call Deputy Donnelly. Thank you. Roaring and shouting is getting nowhere. You're an embarrassment on television.
Curious for the technical group.
Thank you, Ken Corley. Taoiseach, with respect, there's only one group of people here today and yesterday who are insulting the motivation of young people. And that is the group of people who are saying you need to cut their social protection to get them to work, because that is the logic that's being used. Minister Howland came in here yesterday and said, I quote, "I am pleased to announce no reduction in the basic social welfare rates of people of working age." He then announced a reduction in the rates of basic social welfare rates for people under 26. Are people under 26 not of working age? I'm confused. And then the Taoiseach on national radio this morning added insult to injury by saying it's not a cut. In doublespeak worthy of George Orwell, he explained it wasn't a cut, the government was simply extending lower rates to these people. Extraordinary stuff.
Answer that.
Here's what Aideen Carberry, the chairperson of Labour Youth, said about it. It's fundamentally unfair. It is our opinion that it will cause people to emigrate. We watched on with a combination of sadness and concern. I don't think the problem with the unemployment crisis in this country is training. The issue is that there are not enough jobs. Labour Youth. Most of our young unemployed are graduates. They are highly educated and taking low-paid work to make ends meet. Taoiseach, this cut not only displays a complete misunderstanding of the unemployment challenge faced by our youth. It's not just bad economics. It's discriminatory. This, to me, and I mean this most sincerely, this is an issue of human rights. You would not, and none of us would, I hope, come in here and saying we are cutting basic social protections to non-whites, to women, to Muslims. But that's exactly what you've done. You've targeted a group of people based on age. So, Taoiseach, my question to you is this. Do you accept that this cut discriminates based on age? Do you accept that that is not how we should do business in this country? Do you accept that these people are equal citizens in our country? And will you ask Minister Burton to remove this from the Social Protection Bill before it comes before this House? Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Donnelly is normally very constructive in his comments here in the House when he has the opportunity to lead for the technical group. You fully understand in the constituency that you represent that young people have a right to have a chance at getting a job and a career and an opportunity. But it seems as if these parties here want to confine them to the dole queues for the rest of their lives. Now, I want to say this to you, Deputy Donnelly. Taoiseach Gilmore and the Labour Party have been very clear about the position of the government in wanting to provide opportunity for people to get into the world of work. And you must provide an incentive for that. Minister Burton pointed out that it is not the way to go that when a young lad or young girl leave secondary school, that they suddenly end up on the rush of unemployment, which ends in a tunnel of despair. You have to be able to reform a system to give them the opportunity. And the government here have ring-fenced money and places on back to education, on training, on mentoring. We've put in for those young graduates that Deputy MacDonald was speaking about, and that the chairperson of the Young Labour Movement was talking about, who are graduates and who are entrepreneurs, that they can start their own business under the Young Entrepreneur Scheme, that they can avail of mentoring to start those businesses, that they can get state assistance. And if somebody in their mid-20s has been out of work for 15 months, they can now start their own business and have up to 40,000 income tax free based on the 2 years prior to that for setting up those businesses. So it is a case, Deputy Donnelly, of providing the motivation and the opportunity for people to work. Case came into me this morning, married man, 3 children, 3-day week. He was on 560, put on a 3-day week. Between his 3-day week, his unemployment assistance, housing rent and all the rest of it, he's now on nearly 900. Where's the incentive to work? Where's the incentive? This country always beat adversity by being practical about working our way out of it. And this budget, Deputy Donnelly, is about exiting the bailout. That these people over here, I recall the press conference with my predecessor, Taoiseach Cowan, and the late lamented Brian Lenihan, when they walked off the stage and they were replaced by the Troika, and our sovereignty and our economic independence was handed away. This government, of Fine Gael and Labour, is focused on retrieving that economic sovereignty, and our young people will have the opportunity in a new country to have work and careers and opportunity. And that's what this is about. And that's why we ring-fence money and ring-fence places, so that the young people of Wicklow and Dublin and all around the country will have those opportunities to give their ambition and give their talent and give their creative talent an opportunity to flourish.
Deputy Donnelly, 1 minute.
Thank you for your reply, Taoiseach. Taoiseach, I had a young man working for me recently for free who has a degree and a master's degree, and he's now gone on to full-time paid employment. Before him, I had another young man working for me who had a degree and 2 master's degrees, and he worked for me for free as well to get experience, and he has now moved on. These people do not need an incentive to work. Now, if what you're saying, Taoiseach, if what you're saying is that there are other young people out there who, based on getting the normal social welfare rate, are refusing to either take up jobs or take up important training, then I would refer you to the job activation measures that Minister Burton is bringing in, which say if you don't take a job or you don't take reasonable training, I wouldn't want someone with a degree and 2 master's degrees to be told they had to go and train in landscape gardening because they couldn't find a job. But what she's bringing in, which your government's already bringing in, is a rule that says if you refuse a job, you will get no welfare benefits because you are refusing to work. And I have no problem with that. I have a problem with targeting people under 26 for no other reason than they are under 26. In the same way that I would argue if you would come in and targeted women or people of colour or people of a particular religion. This is an issue of human rights. You're not applying it to 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds.
Question, please.
So, Taoiseach, my question is this. We have time, based on the new budgetary process, to step back and think and meet and discuss. So I would ask you to think about this in terms of human rights. I would ask you to be aware that the job activation measures have already been brought in that say if you're sitting at home and you're living on the dole and you refuse to take a job, you get nothing, and I would support that. So my question to you is, in the time that Dáil Éireann has to tease all of this out in the coming months, will you please take it away and reflect that this is an issue of human rights and it is discriminatory? Thank you.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
I regard the issue of human rights as referred to as a right to work, and a right to have an opportunity to work, and that's what good government should be about. Deputy Donnelly, the numbers on the live register were nearly 500,000 just a short time ago. Because of the reforms and the changes that are brought about, and because of the labour activation measures, that has fallen consistently for 15 months. Expected to go below 400,000 before the end of the year. Many of those are young people.
Please.
I regard every person as having the right to work, and I agree with you that for those who decide that they don't want to work, they're in a different situation. But it's true that in the Department of Social Protection for years, different ranges are treated differently, from young people through to the different categories that apply in society, right up to senior citizens. They're all treated in different ways, depending on what category they find themselves in. So I believe that the changes that are made here are really in the interests of young people finding a whole new opportunity, a whole new advantage. And I want to see, Deputy Donnelly, the new intro offices that are being rolled out by by Minister Burton, where there are group interviews, where there are mentoring available from small businesses, where there are people who say, look, I've got a talent for you here, I've got an opportunity. If you do this education course, you can be involved in retrofit or refitting, or whether it was construction you were doing, change direction. But this is about giving them the incentive and the opportunity and the motivation to say, I've got a talent, I want to do something different here, and here's the opportunity for me.
Thank you.
Why is it, Deputy Donnelly, that for years there was never an engagement with them? When they signed on, they were left sign on. This is different. These are our people. These are the future of our country, and they've all got a talent and an opportunity, and we want to let that flourish. And that's what this is about. And the day, Deputy Donnelly, that we exit this bailout is a different day for Ireland. Put the shutters up behind us and never let it happen again, like the legacy and the economic mess that fell down on our people by incompetence, greed and everything else that applied in a culture that we never want to go back to.